first, Dr. Kennedy, please introduce yourself and tell us what you teach at GSU.
My name is Joshua Kennedy. I'm an associate professor of political science in the Department of Political Science and International Studies at Georgia Southern University. I teach courses on American government, the presidency, federal bureaucracy, Congress, and a few others as well. But my expertise is in the presidency and the federal bureaucracy.
So this is a really big year for you, a really big night for you and your students. Tell us about what you are keeping top of mind ahead of tonight's presidential debate.
Top of mind ahead of the debate, I think, is going to be the performance of Vice President Harris. I feel like former President Trump is a bit of a known quantity at this point. Vice President Harris still has an opportunity to define herself in this race. And I'll be curious about the strategy that she's going to pursue. We have a sense already of how Donald Trump does in these kinds of debates. We haven't seen Vice President Harris, except for her debate, of course, with former Vice President Pence in this one-on-one environment seeking the presidency. So that's kind of what I'm going to be keeping an eye on as the debate unfolds tonight.
And we're getting closer and closer to election day. What kind of topics or issues do both candidates need to address this evening?
I think at the top of the list of things to address will include the economy. While inflation has slowed, there are still people feeling the pinch. This is something that Vice President Harris has acknowledged, and it's something that certainly the Republicans are hammering on. I think that is going to be a key point in the debates tonight. I think the issue of immigration, legal and illegal, will come up as well, and that will continue to be a major issue. It's something I know former President Trump wants to sort of hammer and seize on. And it's something that the vice president and the administration are going to want to have an answer for. Those are probably the two biggest issues that come to mind immediately. Um, James Carville famously said back in 1992, it's the economy. It's all about the economy. I don't think that's as much the case anymore, but it still is a major issue, one of the principal ones, and I suspect we'll hear a lot about that tonight.
Yeah, and as I said, we're getting closer to election day. How much of an impact do these presidential debates have at this stage in the election year?
It's an interesting question about the impact of presidential debates because the general sort of received wisdom is that they don't make that much of a difference. And yet, at the end of June, it's the presidential debate we had then pretty much led to a changing of the guard in the Democratic Party. That kind of bucked the trend of received wisdom about whether these debates make any kind of difference. I think it can make a difference, especially in a race as close as this one. A lot of the people watching have already tonight are going to have already made up their minds. But those who might be tuning in for the first time, which is not unusual, there are a number of people throughout the country who are not very politically engaged, who might be just starting to pay attention now as we enter election season. The performance of these candidates, I think, is going to matter. And like I said, in an election that is this close, it could be, I wouldn't go as far as to say decisive, but I think it can have an absolute effect on the shape of the race.
And so, speaking of performance, we know that ABC News has some rules for the debate. The mics will be muted, there's no audience. How does that play a role in the performance of the candidates with the mics being muted and having no audience?
Yeah, without an audience, of course, there's not the chance for the applause lines, which always work well on television. Those lines will still probably be deployed, but of course, without an audience, there you're not going to have that instantaneous reaction. The muting of the mics will keep the actual flow of the debate, I think, relatively muted, since the candidates will not be able to step on each other in any particular way, even though they might like to. I certainly think former President Trump has shown a capacity for doing that and a tendency to want to do that. That will not be a possibility. It might redound to the advantage of both candidates, though, because interruptions can make you look bad. The fact that neither candidate is really going to be able to interrupt the other, I think, might play to both of their advantages. But I think the real wild card is going to be the lack of an audience, because there won't be the applause that people are hearing through their television. There won't be the hooting and hollering from the audience. It certainly is different, and it's a different kind of environment, but it will allow the candidates to showcase themselves without those kinds of distractions.
And so, what do you tell your students to look out for while they're watching debate? What should people keep an eye on?
I think students and anyone watching the debate should keep an eye on how well candidates answer questions. Do they come across like they know what they're talking about? Do they come across like they have a plan? Or are they merely filibustering? Are they merely babbling? Um, it is the case, and it's unfortunate to a degree, that much of the debate performance comes down to aesthetics, comes down to meeting the bar, and how you look almost matters more, it seems sometimes, than what you say. But I would always encourage people to pay attention to what the substantively these candidates are saying, because it's two very different visions for the country, and where we're going from here in this particularly polarized partisan environment. I think it's two very different directions, and I think people ought to pay attention to what those directions are more than just the style with which they deliver their performances.
And so, how long have you been studying American government?
Well, I started graduate school in 2008, so coming up on 20 years now that I've been studying it. First as a graduate student and now as a professor. This is my 11th year at Georgia Southern, so this is the only place I've been as a professor. So as a professional, 11 years now. If you count my grad school time, 16. So closing
Yeah,
in on a couple of decades.
absolutely. And so, are there any presidential debates that stick out in your mind? Any that go down in your bank of history?
The debate that goes down in my bank of history is the one in June, because I was among those who thought, I don't know that debates make that much of a difference. And that one made a huge difference. So that one really sticks in my mind. It's of course the most recent one, before tonight. So there's the recency bias, but I have never been a big believer that it makes a huge difference based on the data that we have. That one did. And I wonder if we're in a different era now, just because of how close things are, how closely divided the parties are. Maybe these do matter more than they used to.
Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you want to talk about tonight's debate?
Nothing that I can particularly think of, nothing that comes to mind immediately. I think it is certainly interesting. It's something I'm looking forward to because I want to see how Vice President Harris performs in the forum. I want to see what former President Trump, how he behaves in the forum. It'll be interesting from that perspective, but I think we've covered most of the ground, most of the things I've thought of.
Well, Dr. Kennedy, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Thank you.